Bolingbroke. I'm the Executive Artistic Director for the National Center for Choreography here at the University of Akron. And I'm super excited to continue joining you as part of GroundWorks Artist Talk series and help me welcome Peter Chu, choreographer this evening. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Christy. How are you?
We're doing good. We're trying to stay warm and just get really into spring. So
Love it. Love it. So great seeing you in the virtual space.
yes, and really excited to get to talk to you a little bit more. We'll reveal later how our paths have seemingly circled each other in the past. But before we get to that, I would love to start by way of introduction to the GroundWorks community. Tell us a little bit more about how did you start dancing? How did you arrive at this point in your life?
Oh, wow. Yes, it's a long story, but I'll make it short. My mother is a music teacher, and she was one of my first music teachers growing up. So music's been around our household since I was little, since I was born. So I've always had an affinity for music and movement and the arts in general. I actually started dancing at age 12, and I started as an acrobat and a gymnast.
Hmm.
But I was, believe it or not, I don't tell this often, but I I was a little burnt out in high school, so I was supposed to go to Ohio State University.
Oh my
I was going,
goodness, Buckeye
yes,
Confessions. Okay.
yes. I just wanted to get out of Florida, and at that time I wanted to study sports medicine, and I was heavy into cheerleading, and I think I just got a little burnt out. But 2 weeks before I was supposed to start, I had the honor of training in LA, and one of my dance mentors at the time was just suggesting that I don't leave this gift. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to start university, I called Point Park and asked them to accept me again. And then did a year at Point Park, and then did 4 years at Juilliard. So that's
Amazing.
kind of my trajectory.
Amazing. And I'm curious then, and we'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about the work that you've developed for GroundWorks. It's still to this day is one of the scariest invitation is to tell people like, hey, why don't you come to my dance show? Because dance can be so many things. So I'd love to hear more about like what is your movement aesthetic or affinity, if it fits within some of our known genres, or if you want to talk about it free form in your own words.
Yes. You know, I first started my company back in 2008, and Linda Kent was a mentor teacher of mine at Juilliard, and she started a thing called New Works Festival at Perry Mansfield, and that's why I initially started the company. And it
Mm,
was a way to percolate the ideas that I was working with after my life after Juilliard. I've always had an affinity for Tai Chi and Qigong. I've been practicing that for years, since I was younger, but really heavily influenced by my Chinese medicine doctor in 2009.
mm,
And I wanted a space, I formed through this to really start understanding my cultural heritage and
mm,
my movement lineage, which is based in not just ballet and whatnot, but I had a influential jazz dance teacher. And yes, it was foundational, but we did my ballet, the dance studio director used to bring us to a Florida dance festival that was based out of cultural practices, which I always found fascinating. And that was my upbringing of what jazz dance was not just a studio um, viewpoint of what jazz dance is. It was a cultural reference. So I formed through this to really find a place to start understanding what this lineage is. And
mm.
it didn't really start until like 2012. And then starting in 2016, when I came back to the United States, I wanted to come back without being apologetic about my lineage, movement lineage specifically. And I have always coupled the ideas together, but I really started forming this class called Fortuitous Ideas. It's based off of freeform thoughts, based off of Tai Chi and Qigong fundamentals. I train with Shifu in California and one in China, and using all the principles from traditional Chinese medicine to Taoist Tai Chi practices, mixed with how American jazz dance formed.
Mm.
what's so fascinating to me, and I speak about this often, I just think it really is fascinating that they were both built out of oppression, and they were both for communities to help heal and to help better serve the individual body when they can't afford, especially in Asia. Qigong was formed when people couldn't afford to go see a medical doctor or a practitioner. And that's what I really wanted to go back to. Why am I moving? Why am I grooving? Why are we here? Why are we celebrating rhythm? And that's ultimately kind of what I'm interested in and fascinated in continuing to research and develop and undevelop in the next couple of years.
I love that, sharing that parallelism. What was also unstated, but I feel compelled to name, is your relationship to American jazz dance, and then also that is almost inseparable to its own relationship to music, which is also inherent in you. So there's sort of an ongoing theme working with that.
Yeah, you know what's fascinating about rhythm is rhythm is cleansing. We have qigong practices called 6 healing sounds, and it's about vibrations, and vibrations are actually quite cleansing for the body and the soul. Jazz dance, grooving, repetition, that stuff, and that's what I talk a lot about in the work. It helps you get into this flow-like state, this groove state of mind, if you will. And you stop, this is like when you're running a 25K marathon. You stop thinking at a certain point and you're just being, you're just embodying. And that's what's so fascinating about those two practices, that they both taught me that, is how to groove, how to be present, how to embody, and how to be in real time with the rhythm.
Not to put them on a binary, but I think on the other end of the spectrum, you've also had some tremendous performance experiences with companies like Crystal Pite's Kid Pivot or the Celine Dion Vegas Spectacular. Can you talk a little bit about how those are completely different or somehow, similar and interwoven in your own work as a choreographer?
Yes. And, growing up, I had many different interests, and I definitely had a huge physical practice of acrobatics and gymnastics. It was a huge part of my training. It's how I started. And I, I, I don't know if I did a great job of it, but part of my career is based both out of the commercial dance world and the concert dance world. I don't like to separate. I really don't.
I know. That's what I was like. I don't want to set it up as a binary. But
Yeah,
there is we'll make it a Venn diagram. So there's overlap.
exactly. Well, everything I look at as like yin and yang sign. It's circular. And I look at, I'm going to say this, but I'm probably wrong. I haven't done so much research, but I look at commercial work as something with payment. And it doesn't mean that it's lesser art or this, that. Sometimes when you're doing commercial work, you just have less time. It doesn't mean it's lesser art. You just have less time. But I love entertainment. I love performing. I love performative experiences. I love immersive experiences. I'm all for all of the above. And I just want to be celebrating movement as a practice as a whole. And so when I formed True This, the reason why I initially formed True This is because I was getting a little, I was having a difficult time being labeled, that I wasn't commercial enough and I wasn't concert enough. So in the early millennium, that was a big term. It's like, you're not this, you're not that, you're not filling a mold. So I said, True This. And I wanted to form something that I really believe in, and I can incubate ideas, research with a group of people that I absolutely am inspired by and with, and develop new thoughts to provoke thought. So I've kind of straddled all of the above, and now it's kind of going in not another direction, it's continuing around that circle. So I'm just like I am still working in that world every now and again, but more than 50% of the time I'm in working with live theater. And I embrace it. I love that. I feel like that's who I am as an artist, and I need both to survive. I need the both and.
Well, and I appreciate that we're trying to like complicate this idea, of the binary. I like to reference Liz Lerman's Hiking the Horizontal, which she often will say, like just a performance at Lincoln Center and a performance at a senior center, they're not one's greater than the other. They're on a continuum. And then I think there's also something inherent to all of your lived experience on stage and off and in front of the camera is part of the foundation on which you are the artist you are today. Which also leads me to kind of pull out something I know about you is that we almost connected because you were a competition dance choreographer. And I am a former competition dancer, something not a lot of people know. And our times were different, but you were often brought in like multiple years to come and make work on my alma mater company, Kingwood Jazz and Company. Shout out Houston, Texas. And so I'm really curious how you might reflect on that experience. You talked about sometimes commercial work means you have less time. Those projects are shorter gestation periods. For those who maybe are less familiar with competition dance, usually like the entire dance, the world you need to make can be 2.5, maybe 3 minutes long. So I'm really curious, like what you would point to from that in your history and foundation as far as the artist that you are.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Kingwood Jazz Company and Kingwood DanceTheater at Roland Ballard's. they they gave me my first job, so I owe them a lot. It was my first job in 1999. I started there, and I think my last time there was like 2013, 2012. For me, I knew I always wanted a dance company, and it was the closest thing in the early years of my training. I was at Juilliard, and I would be flown down once a month. I'm not going to lie, it paid the bills. But usually I personally tried after a few years of doing that, I tried getting rid of this idea of saying I'm making a competition dance routine. I was learning a lot at Juilliard at the time, and I used it as a way to incubate the ideas I was learning in composition class. And how to become a better pedagogue, because I really love pedagogy. I love mentorship. I love this idea of exploration. And Amy Duncan was the director at the time, and Cheryl Rowland, but they gave me a lot of autonomy to help provide new ideas and new ways of working, and I love that. Some things worked, a lot of things did not, and I'm just so grateful for that opportunity. It was a less stressful situation. Again, I got paid, but it was a safe place. It was more like a laboratory for me. And I was very honest about it. I felt so safe to make work, and especially in the earlier years. And I just recently retired from that world like a year and a half ago. I still am a part of it. We set rep, but I've learned so much, and I owe so much to that world because it's paid for so much in my career. But I've taken away a lot, and I was also able to nurture not just the artistic side, but the business side, the entrepreneurial side. I learned a lot about money. I learned a lot about how to navigate discussions about money, about contracts. And I was never taught that at school. Luckily, schools are guiding that. But that's something that it was an interest of mine. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. And a lot of people, when they are in the competition settings, they usually stick and they'll do one weekend and that's it for the year. I knew right off the bat that the word consistency was really important. And if I was going to have a long-lasting relationship with Kingwood Jazz Company, again, yes, I know it's just a competition dance studio, but how do you leave an impression and how do you build with that community? And I used to say that I need to be there once or twice a month. And sometimes they would fly me in from Montreal when I was living in Montreal as well. And I just really believe in the word consistency and training and mentorship. And so that's kind of how I feel about the world. I'm grateful. I'm so proud of it. I used to be apologetic, but I'm no longer apologetic.
Oh no. Yeah.
Right?
No, embrace it. I love to pull that one out. I was like, you know what? It is who we are.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to hear you talk about that. I mean, I obviously grew up in that community, and Amy and Cheryl afforded that experience for me as well. The responsibility that they allowed me to do at 14, 15 years old and choreographing these whole numbers and also teaching. It was my first job too. I was struck specifically about the relationship to time because the consistency doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think a lot of studio environments, they are like small companies. but no, none of the dancers are getting paid, right? Because the parents are paying for training, but you are dancing 6-7 days a week. The consistency doesn't surprise me because of your relationship to Qigong as a practice as well. And that's one of the reasons that I love the term practice, because there is a sort of ritual and return to that. But I also, if I could add one thing, I'm curious if you'd agree, working in the competition world, I found that I learned how to make the dancers in front of me really excellent, as well as push them further, right? So get to know them. What are they good at? And then how are we going to, dial up the volume a little bit? And the other thing I think is to be decisive as an artist, because even if you're coming one weekend a month, you may have literally one weekend and you're building a piece. And so you have to be generative and quick and say, I like this, I don't like that, and move on. So I was curious how that's informed your own process, if you agree with like working under those constraints, to then now how you're able to operate when you're defining, how the creative process you want on your own terms.
Yes, I'm so glad that you bring that up. It's invaluable, the tools that I was given during that time, but you do have to work quickly, and it really did set me up more for the commercial television work. I have not done a lot of television work, but for the small amount that I have, you have to work quick. You have to think on your toes. You need to make a change right off the bat. And that, I am an indecisive person because I love everything. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know how
all
I
of
feel.
it, bring it.
It takes me a long time to process after seeing a show, because I'm like, gosh, everything, because I would not make that choice. So I think that's interesting to me. But with the dance studio world, it has taught me to be decisive. Most definitely. It taught me that the studio, I am at my best when I'm in the dance studio. It is very sacred to me. I don't second guess myself when I'm alone in the studio with dancers. When I have other people coming in and other energies, sometimes I second guess it, but I'm at my calmest. Maybe not before, not after, but in that sanctuary, I feel present, I feel alive, and I feel like I can also listen to what's needed in the space. And that's even before even though I did Qigong going into Kingwood, it didn't really dive into it till 10 years later, like heavily into it. And that's the Qigong practice that has taught me, is like, how do you share space? What is your relationship to those around you, not just to yourself, but how are you sharing space with others? So yeah, the Kingwood experience, it is relative to the scale. So the consistency for competition dance world, once a month is quite a lot for what most people, sometimes they just do once a year and one weekend. But I can't believe I'm going to say this, but sometimes I would have to do 6 3-minute pieces in one weekend. I'm not proud of that, but I learned a lot from it.
Yes.
Earlier on, Cheryl Rowland allowed me to start making longer works, 10 to 15-minute works. And then I started carrying that over to the competition world, and we started making 4, and now it's like 15-minute works in the competition setting. The conventions and competitions don't always like it, but for the students' education, I think it's really important that they have that kind of a process to know. Very different, a 3-minute dance, routine, whatever you want to call it, piece, to 15-minute in their early training, that's very different. And the way you rehearse it, and the way you implement that in scheduling too.
It's cardiovascular endurance, it's emotional endurance, mental endurance, to stay engaged with that too. It's such a good point. I brought it up, this idea of time. First of all, I also want to affirm, don't apologize for 6 3-minute dances in a weekend. I often wonder, like in the visual arts world, how sketches happen, and how an artist, I think about Jasper John's number series. You're like, here it is in pencil, here it is in acrylic, here it is in oil. It's the same 9 numbers, right? And so in some ways, I think the 6 3-minute dances are doing a series of that. It is that's supposed to be like less precious. You're not building just a single thing, and it has to be everything, but it gives you that space to practice it over time. What is it in this context? to exercise all those different choices that you said. You're like, I like all the choices. Okay, then you get to try them out and, change it up.
And yeah, and it was such a safe space. And also, I love music. And sometimes in my earlier training, I didn't understand. There's some music I probably just would not choose for this, perhaps. So therefore, I can use music that I would
Mhm.
not choose. And I
It's another
love
outlet.
exactly. It brings another physicality, another emotional aspect out of you. And I definitely am still drawing from it. I actually owe a lot of my professional career to the dance studio world because that's where Juilliard, great, incredible educators, Point Park, incredible educators. But I learned a lot because I'm such a loner and I like to learn by myself. I love to
Mhm.
read up on things, and then when I'm in the sacred place, I feel at my best to really listen to what is really needed from within. And the dance studio world has given me, I just feel like now I really understand that. It's like 27 years. I'm
Oh my
aging
God.
myself. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm aging myself because by the time you came in '99, I had been gone for probably 2 or 3 years. But it is sometimes the distance we need to appreciate that.
Yeah.
And you reminded me of it because I was fortunate to get to see some of the work in process showings when you were last in Cleveland. And you had made a comment about how rich and generous the commissioning experience was with GroundWorks to have 3 weeks on the ground. And that is not the norm. I'm wondering for those we're talking to the GroundWorks community, of course, who, they get to see so many artists come through, but maybe don't realize how special it is that in other places that's not the priority of process. So could you talk a little bit about like what was the experience like here at GroundWorks and how is that different than other companies you've worked with?
Yes, well, compared to I'll say this, the pre-professional company dance world, it's very different. Usually, you have like a weekend, or now I've implemented in the past 5 years, I need at least a week to do a restaging or reimagining of a 10-minute work. But Groundworks in America, you tend to have like 2 weeks for a university program or 2 weeks for a small dance company. Um, it wasn't until this year that I've actually had 3 creations that were 4 to 3 weeks. I've never had that in my life. I did have a semester at Juilliard, but that was a semester,
Mhm.
not gig, but
Yeah, and that
project.
might be once, twice a week, for an hour because you're one of many things they're doing. Yeah.
Exactly. And what's so special about David is he basically opened up his space in his home and he let me lead however I wanted to lead. And what's important to me, Christy, is guiding. I don't take it for granted. This is an opportunity, creative process is an opportunity to connect with that community, with those in the room with you, to get to know them, to honor their lineage, to honor the collaborative side. And having 3 weeks gives you the space to do that. I was able
Mhm.
to teach every day. I always, even if they had ballet class, I would still do a Treatise Ideas class because it's the fundamentals. I love cleaning, but a huge part of my cleaning process is the dancers need to learn how to question and clean themselves based off of
Mhm.
what class. And it gives them a little more autonomy, a little more liberty to start doing that research. And that's one thing I will say that David has fostered in the company is he leads with an open mind and open heart, and you can really feel it from the artists that he brings into the company. It was such a safe, inspiring environment. I didn't want to leave, and it's one of, I know it's a small company, but I'm like, world, watch out. These are incredible artists. I want people to see this company so special, and I want to go back and make the piece longer now. So
Well,
yeah,
and with that kind of spacious generative environment, you made not one but two pieces.
yeah. So yes, I this past year I've been, because of the pandemic, things got pushed, but I've been very fortunate. I got to make a 30-minute work at Paul Taylor. I'm really grateful for that opportunity. I've never had an experience like that, and I got to make a full evening in Germany, and I'm really grateful for that. But I needed to, heading into this is 3 back to back because of what happened in the pandemic. I don't I'm grateful for it, but it was a lot of back-to-back work.
Mhm.
So I needed to change it up for me. And, I entered the creative process with with a desire to provide space. That was really important, to go in with this idea of what is calm and response mean? What does that mean? To hear what the dancers need, to hear what that collaborative experience is with those 5 new dancers in a smaller company. It's, people forget, when you have a small company, they are dancing nonstop. They don't have one break. They're going from the beginning of the day until the end. And every choreographer, I assume, that goes in probably wants to use all 5 dancers. So I wanted to break it up to also just change up and make smaller pieces, because I haven't made 10-minute works in a while. They've been like 20 to 30 to 60 minutes. Again, grateful, but I'd like to change it up. But it was important for us to talk about, what does community mean? What does repetition mean? What does consistency mean? What does the word call and response mean? What does calm and recovery? And we had time to talk about it. And then there was a day or 2 days that I said, let's actually generate and focus on generating and not speak. Let's not use our words. Let's use the wisdom of the body and the physicality. And again, the 3-week period allows you the space to do this research that's so important. And I think it connected all of us at a profound level, because we were not speaking. We stopped talking. We focused on the jazz music term of call and response. I would give them a thought. They would make it they would add on to that physical movement, and we'd keep on digging in, and then we built a phrase. And I did that with all 5 dancers. And I felt like that spoke louder than any verbal dialogue. And that's one thing I will not forget. That call and response, 2 days, is because of that 3-week process. And yeah, just to watch how they responded to that was so special.
Well, and I'm thinking about that sort of like, the time to try something, that the creative process is not a linear one where you came in and you're like, great, I've got 15 days and we are going to build a minute and a half a day, right? Like I think there's a little bit of mysticism around, like when we go in to make a work, that you start and then you just move it until it's done. But this idea of like, to take the circuitous route and a little scenic and see what you develop, and then maybe over here, I am curious, just continuing to riff on how you think about time, because you've taken to say like, oh, it's a 20-minute work, or I'm going to do 2 10-minute works. How do you know when something's done? How do you know when something's finished?
I love that you say that. So, and contractually, sometimes you have to do a certain amount of work, right? Like, 25 to 30-minute work. So I knew I needed to do that. It was quite organic for this process. I knew I had 2 pieces of music that I wanted to use for this first piece called Unrecover. And if I added it up, I realized, oh, I'm missing about 3 to 4 minutes because I have to look at my contract. But how did I know when it was done? I actually knew it was done by just listening to that music. But it opened my eyes. This is a positive thing about realizing, oh, I'm not going to make the number for the contract. So I was like, okay, what else can I do? I was like, oh, Peter, this is really important. I looked at my notes. I really wanted to talk about this idea of consistency, this idea of creating waves, creating echoes, creating ripples. And I've been working a lot with live sound and echoing and reverb in actual live sound. So it gave us the opportunity, because I wasn't making my minutes. No one said anything, but I like to honor the contract. Of course, like, no, let's add soundscape to this first piece. So we wound up adding this live. And for me, it's really important to have a collaborative process with the digital space, the digital world as well, and having microphones on stage. So we connected with the CSU technician, and he helped guide us with all these microphones, these I think they're called like shotgun mics, and I could just play with that, and we played with that for a whole week, and then it helped add 3 minutes to the piece, and now it's a huge part of that, the whole 15-minute experience. So,
and that's on Unrecover. So because I know we've also talked about the layers, which I think is also fascinating, like how layers develop, right? Like I like a food metaphor. So when you're developing layers of flavor, it needs time to simmer, and you don't add everything all at once. And it's not like laying bricks where you're like, and then layer 1 and then layer 2. So I love where there's room that you have an intention, but there's also room to say like, oh, and what else could there be? And that it's not a shortcoming to say, oh, I'm missing minutes, but rather like, oh, that's an opportunity to explore something different.
Yes, exactly what you just said. And also to add on top of that, we really set it up properly that I spoke to them. I said, let's just use this as a research period. We're researching, we're developing new ideas, and using the Chew This Idea platform. Again, nothing that I own. I am certified in all these things that I practice. And I love that because I just love learning and I love unlearning things as well. But set up using free form and improvisational ideas. I say free form more because it comes from more of a Qigong, a Tai Chi practice. Really set the precedent of how every single day would be led. And we always put exploration, free form, experimenting, incubating at the forefront. That was always at the center of the room. And throughout the whole process, what I realized, I was like, oh, this is how I work with the dance studios. And I learned this by working with the dance studios, that every single day I would add a new idea, take out a new idea. And I'm just going, sometimes people think it's a science. I'm like, no, I do work with words. Sometimes I do work, I write a lot, not a great writer, but I like it to use it as a guide. And sometimes I think I use probably 20% of that writing going into this process. And I quickly steered another direction once I met the artist, because they are dictating the space as well with their energy and what they're giving. So it's really important that I stay present in the creative process so that when I am a part of the directing ship, they're also directing me. That's why I try to remind people, yes, I might be calling out cues or whatnot during a process, but I'm vibing off of the energy that they're giving.
And there's another collaborator in the room. I'm wondering, could you describe working with the, I don't know if composer would be the right term, but your musical collaborator?
Oh, yes. So the second, there's two pieces. There's another piece called Willow. I was actually initially going to have Mike Gordon. Mike Gordon is a jazz musician, incredible musician. We really fully worked together during the pandemic. We did an hour immersive Zoom experience for Chew This called Welcome Home, and he did the whole evening of music, which was great. We all did it in the virtual space.
Amazing.
It was fun. It was inspiring. But initially I said, okay, I need something like a 10-minute piece. But when I went into the room the first week, it quickly went in a different direction. So we worked from afar. We worked with the soundscape. He sound designed the 3-minute intro to the Joan Armatrading song called Willow. And that was quite fluid. I gave him some words that I was working with, like this idea of like calm and recover, call and response. What does it mean to uncomplicate the complicated in a creative space? What does it mean to add layers? We talked about layering and delayering. We talked about mapping old and new. And so he came up with a 3-minute sound design, and we worked from afar during that. It was quite fluid. It was quite quick. And also another collaborator was the assistant, Roger Vanderpool. He actually, a lot of times you bring a choreographic assistant to help with movements and whatnot, but Roger's incredible. Not only did he teach ballet class, and not only did he fill in for a dancer when they were injured,
Oh, wow.
He was helping me figure out the soundscape, because I needed the music. I needed the live music and the live sound to be working. So he was working on QLab the whole time, all the while juggling all these parts. So I don't like to say that I'm leading the space. It does feel very communal. It feels quite collaborative when we were there for 3 weeks.
Well, then there is like a vibing, or almost like a jam session, to borrow from other music terms and practices as well.
Yeah.
And I didn't know all that Robert did, because on the day that I came, he was seated at QLab. I was like, who's the man behind the soundscape?
Yes. He's incredible, and he offers suggestions. Sometimes I'll throw ideas at him, and he'll give me his thoughts. And that if I have an assistant, I want to use that. I want to use the space, and I honor that. And honestly, the dancers were quite present in the space. So yes, did I come in with like 2 source materials? I love to generate physical material before I go in. We used it, but we didn't use all of it, and we just used it to manipulate, to generate new ideas. It just gives us a common vernacular, a common language, just to start, and then we can take it away later on.
Also, once again, reiterating that the creative process is not a linear one, but really as a way of organizing people and leading them and sharing a common share experience, something that
Yes.
you could all refer back to, even if a lot of it isn't going to carry forward. But you're like, great, we all did that together. Excellent. As
Exactly.
opposed to coming at it as just the individuals that you are, but making that space too. Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I can't wait for it to premiere.
Well, and I'm curious though, because while we've certainly talked about different relationships to time and the creative process, not being linear but more agile, and you have this beautiful sort of amorphous environment where you're not leading but you're being and inviting other people. At the same time, your name is behind the choreography, and there's a deadline, there is a finish line. And I love artists, especially dance makers and production folks, who understand a deadline, right? Because curtain up is curtain up. You knew at some point in those 3 weeks when there would be an invited audience. I'm curious if you ever find yourself in a rut, or things are maybe kind of just circling in the same place and don't feel that they're moving forward. Do you have any tricks or practices to sort of like break out of that when you're feeling the pressure of a deadline?
I mean, my first response is I wish I did, but what I will say is, because, and I don't mean to bring it back to this, because of the 27 years in the dance studio world, that rigor and that way of working, because sometimes I'd spend 12 hours a day in the dance studio
Yeah.
and then fly back to Juilliard and have to start at 8:30 in the morning on Monday. I'm not saying that's healthy. That's not healthy, because there is a hustle to that. But some of us needed to do that in order to make ends meet. And I look at it as a blessing. I've learned a lot. But putting in that 10,000 hours of that kind of way of working, I think, not think, I know it has developed a side that I just trust when I'm in that studio. I'm not going to lie, I was nervous that I was not going to make my 25-minute mark. I was nervous.
Sure.
And I was panicking, but I knew I would get there. At the end of the day, I trust the process. I really do, because of the Qigong and Tai Chi practice. Even though I might have a little bit of anxiety centered around finishing, I know I will finish. And I know I can work fast in 2 days if I need to. So, and because we mapped out all the tasks, all the thoughts, all the dancers knew, we didn't have to clean up. We never really cleaned. We would just review, because they already knew how we were working from week one.
Yeah.
So it was quite fluid by setting it up that way. I'm not saying it can work like that all the time.
Sure.
Also, just leading a warm-up that are based off of some Tai Chi fundamentals helps calm me down naturally.
Mhm.
And walking, like as I was discussing with you earlier, I love to walk. It's meditative, it's calming, and it helped me come up with 2 titles.
There you go. I mean, I love so much of that. I think sometimes we only look at the physical side of dance. And a lot of times when people say warm up, they assume muscles. But what also comes through is there's a mental warm up. And I'm also glad to hear that you do get nervous sometimes, because I think that's the humanness, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We often will put our artists up on a pedestal and they're just, master work makers over. It's like, no, they're human beings too behind the work. And that's
I'm
beautiful.
nervous even when I go guide the space, like guide a class, I get nervous. But
Mhm.
I trust, because once I step in and I feel the energy of the dancers or whomever's in front, um, I have to say I owe that to my Eastern practices. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad that our paths finally crossed in Ohio, of course.
Yes, love it.
But just getting started, and want to remind all of our friends tuning in, so you can see Willow and Unrecover and Peter's work in the upcoming spring performance series there at the bottom of the screen. Go to groundworksdance.org. The upcoming performances are in Akron on April 9th and 10th at the Night Civic Stage at the Akron Civic Theater. And then also May 6th and 7th in Cleveland at the Latinus Black Box Theater at Pivot Center for Art, Dance, and Expression. Until we see each other again, Peter, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, David, and the whole team at GroundWorks Dance Theater. Bye,
Thank you
y'all.
so much. Bye.